Todd Gilchrist, Fidelity National Title, the
Correct.
man. And Todd, the reason we have you on the show today, the reason I wanted to bring you on board today is because in my 15 years in lending of doing loans, mortgages, real estate transactions, you are the only one that I've ever truly, truly enjoyed and felt like I got the truth from. And the way you guys operate is second to none. You guys are such a good team. Communication's awesome. And you guys are so damn intelligent. We ask you guys questions that are high level lending questions, and you always come through. So thank you for being here. That is why I wanted to interview you today.
Well, gosh, what an honor, Tim. I thank you for those kind words. We've enjoyed working with you for many years now, frankly. So excited to be here and obviously support you and see what I can bring to give some education to your clients and certainly people new to real estate.
Yeah, well, we trust you and we know that you'll shoot them straight. So I just wanted to start
Same to you.
with I want to address, and this is going to be a little bit elementary for you, but part of the thing at True Rate Mortgage Group, one of our things is to be fully transparent, but also to really take a 101 approach to everything because we don't take for granted the knowledge that we have. We've closed thousands of loans, and we still know that people don't buy houses frequently. So when they buy, it's like what is title again? What is the role? So let's start there. Let's talk about the role of a transaction, whether it's a purchase or a refinance. What
Sure.
is the role of title?
Well, and to your point, I think people constantly going through a re-education process, right? Even if they've transacted 3 or 4 times
That's right.
over a lifetime, it's, you're 6, 7+ years removed. And so you really do have to get re-educated because not only is it something that you're not doing frequently, but things change in our world, right? Contractually, whatever. But so the role of the title company, I think there's kind of some misinformed opinions of what that is these days. So I like to separate the industry kind of into two segments. We do have this more traditional kind of old school piece of actually ensuring people's interests in real property, right? And there's kind of a twofold component to that. There's the administrative piece of making sure that the right person's in title and that's going to be conveyed properly to the successive owner and that person has some protection about their ownership. But there's also a large piece that's disclosure related, right? There's a lot of anytime you're transacting and wanting to own and be involved in real property, there are recorded interests that led up to this time in history on your property that as an owner, you're going to want to be very aware of, right? On a more basic level, you're talking about covenants. You're talking about easements. You're talking about things that are going to impact the way in which you can use property. Colorado, another sample might be it's a little different than other places. Mineral interests are separated from surface rights. So a popular thing in certainly Weld County and other parts of the state where oftentimes that's something you actually want to know and consider because somebody could be accessing and getting to the minerals beneath the surface of the property. That is kind of, again, one of those two main pillars of that title insurance piece is, are you the owner, right? Have all the other ownership interests been extinguished along the way that will make sure you are in fact the only owner of that property? That's
Are you
correct.
the owner? God forbid you buy a property and there's an error on title and there's a mistake. Here you are, $500,000 or whatever it cost you in deep. So that's important with title. Like your job is huge. What goes on behind the scenes for you guys when you get a new order? Like, let's say I'm a buyer, I'm buying a home, and we chose your title company because you guys are the best. What goes on behind the scenes? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, for sure. So when you first open a transaction with us, we will perform a title search, right? A lot of that is digitized these days. However, I think folks would be surprised at how much of that is still a little manually oriented, depending on where the property's located. We still maintain mounds of records of real property records back to the beginning of patent. In Colorado, interests in property, like I was describing from a disclosure standpoint, a lot of mineral interests were severed back at the turn of the century, for example. So that conveyance, maybe from the United States government to whatever, the railroad or XYZ owner, that if they reserve some minerals in that transfer in the late 1800s, that can still actually impact someone's rights and use of a property.
Tell me about what does that Can you simplify that and make that in very simple form for people that are unaware of what that even means?
Sure. I think in the simplest form, Tim, I think you would want to have some level of knowledge that commonly in Colorado, you don't necessarily own the rights to the minerals beneath your property.
Wow.
And so other that gets severed, or in many cases in this state is severed from the surface interest ownership. So there are
So somebody
many,
could own
many.
underneath my house, but not my house.
Correct. That's
Wow.
correct.
That's
Yes.
crazy.
And historically, that's always been relevant, for obvious reasons. Yes.
Yep.
Just
That's interesting, man. I really didn't even think about the mineral rights. So when somebody places an order with you guys are gonna one of your jobs is to check on that, right? And make sure that the mineral rights and the title, and you're basically looking for a what is called a clean title.
I think that's fair. Just to be really clear about mineral rights, though, the title industry does not insure mineral rights. We don't guarantee anybody what they own in terms of mineral rights. Those chains of title kind of take on their own existence when they are severed from the surface. So the title industry has never worked towards insuring people about what those mineral interests are exactly. So the title can be the title commitment could be a good indication if they've been severed, not completely always accurate, or to be relied upon in that way, but beyond a severance, they're not going to be of much value to determine who owns the minerals, what exactly they own, etc.
Let's talk a little bit about fees. When
Sure.
like now
Yeah.
there's buyer fees and there's seller fees. Every transaction has a title company involved. You guys are sort of like the middleman. You exchange the money, you do the background checks, you make sure the paperwork is good. Am I missing anything there?
No, I like that. I would say too, and kind of back to your initial question, Tim, when I dissect the business into two pieces, so that's kind of that older school title insurance piece, and the other is this escrow and closing world, right? That's where a great deal of our cost and time and energy is these days, for sure, versus kind of a prior period where so much more emphasis was on that production of that title piece. But yes, a very sophisticated side of the world these days, escrow and closing with wire fraud and so forth. So because of history, a lot of our fees are assessed in the form of that title insurance piece, but we handle the closing side in my mind for a lot lesser expense. Yet that's again where most of our expense resides these
All
days.
right, so
So
we
I would attribute that to history.
so
But
your role is you're going to make sure that you're going to do everything with the title, protect the buyer and the seller, really, and you guys are going
correct.
to make sure that the transaction's legit in terms of ownership and those sorts of things. And then on the other side, we have this escrow and closing thing. What is included in that?
Sure. And I like the way you said earlier, we are a neutral piece to that transaction, right? Which
That's right.
I think serves the general public well, because there's a lot of competing interests in a transaction, right? You've got the parties, potentially you've got arguably whether or not they should be competing, I would make a strong topic about, but you've got lenders, you've got real estate agents, potentially you've got attorneys.
That's right.
So there's a lot of competing needs as well, right? Aside from just interests. So our job is in large part to coordinate all of those pieces up to and including, perhaps on the seller side, we're obtaining payoffs from the existing mortgage company. We're obtaining status letters from an HOA company. We're obtaining final water from municipalities and places that could end up being a lien on the property potentially. Perhaps there are more complicated things on the property. There's a lis pendens, some form of a lawsuit, something's in foreclosure. We've got to deal with the attorneys and the public trustee. So it can get more complicated, but more generically or simplified, Tim, often we're obtaining those payoffs. The money flows through our entity, right? So we kind of collect all of those pieces, be it new funds, your funds as the lender, the buyer's funds, and we're clearing all of those
Well,
matters
so
to make sure that.
you guys bring it all together. Like you guys are so important. What I have found is if the lender does a really good job on a transaction and if the realtor does a really good job on a transaction, if the title company does not communicate well or is not efficient in the steps, because there's so many things going on in a purchase or a refinance. But when a title company is on board and they're right in the middle of that transaction and they're passing messages across to the borrower, to the realtor, to the lender, like you guys make that transaction so amazing. And I can't emphasize that enough. Your role is so important. You're not an afterthought in a transaction. I mean, I've had situations where you guys specifically, is it Kelly? No, it's
Kelly, yep. Kelly Horn, yep.
specifically Kelly has absolutely saved a transaction for us by being quick, on her, thinking on her feet, smart. There's a little hiccup. Uh-oh, we forgot something, or the realtor forgot something, or the lender, something happened. She picks up that gap and you don't even know it happened. And it's such a vital role. That's why I love working with Kelly and your whole staff, because you guys get it. You get that the buyer experience, you guys can really, really save a buyer experience in a transaction.
Those are kind words, Tim. I would turn that a little bit, and not to be the mutual admiration society, but I think you and your team are so communicative that probably is at least somewhat a reflection
Yeah,
on how you all conduct yourselves,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But to your overarching point, we can do our best in our piece of communication, but it really does take all those pieces involved if something's going to be smooth, right? And by that I mean brokers, I mean mortgage lenders, I mean the title, even the parties of the transaction these days. There's a lot more direct communication with parties to a transaction than there used to be, right? A lot of that was funneled through the professionals previously, but there's a lot more direct communication these days.
Yeah, we are a very, very hands-on, direct,
Agreed.
very assertive and proactive communication. That's how we close loans quickly. It's our goal. Our goal is to get everything up front and get it done quickly without you guys, without you guys being so good at getting information and things handled up front. You guys will go as fast as we want to go. That's another thing. I mean, if it's like we got to
We
go
try.
quick, it's like no problem. If we're not in a rush, no problem. You let us know. We have situations, we're working with some title companies where it will take a week to get a response on an email. And no matter how hard you try, there's just no sense of urgency. And I've always been blown away by that, because I would think you have trained your group and your staff, and you guys have this understanding that we want to impress realtors, we want to impress lenders. It's obvious,
Critical. Yeah, yeah,
critical. It's a
yeah,
business. We are all in a business here. But at the end of the
for
day, the
sure.
business is giving buyers and sellers an awesome experience.
Agreed. We're fortunate. We work for an incredible company, frankly, and not to just toot our own horn, but the leader in the title insurance space in the country. So we have strong infrastructure that certainly helps as compared to, a 1-2 person shop somewhere that may not have the resources to react like we're privileged to do. So thank you for that though, Tim.